Montana Territory, 1884. The wind carried dust and judgment across the town of Red Elk as Francesca James stepped out of the mercantile, her chin high despite the quiet laughter trailing behind her. "She's still wearin' ribbons in her hair like she's 20," one woman whispered. 50 if she's a day," another added, not even bothering to lower her voice. Francesca heard it all. She always did. But she did not flinch. She held a paper bundle of flour and a tin of coffee close to her chest and walked steady down the wood-planked sidewalk. Her boots tapped with purpose, even if her heart was starting to clench. The way it always did when the stairs came too long and the words too sharp. She passed the sheriff's office without glancing that way, though she felt eyes on her from inside. She always did. Sheriff Merrick Hale stood behind the glass door, watching her. He had only been in Red Elk for 4 months, sent up from Wyoming after the last sheriff took a bullet meant for someone else. Merrick was young, 26, town gossip said, but he wore his badge like it meant something. He was quiet, but not cold. And when he looked at Francesca, he never seemed to see the old maid the town called her. He saw something else. She was 42. A widow twice now. Her first husband had died of fever during the winter of '67. The second one, a good man with a soft laugh, had been gunned down outside Butte in '78. She had no children. No family left. Just the 2 goats she kept behind her cottage and the greenhouse she worked behind her house each spring. The town thought that made her strange. But Merrick, well, he never said much. Not until that afternoon. Francesca had just made it to her small white cottage on the edge of town when she heard the fast hoofbeats. She turned to see him, Sheriff Hale, riding hard up the road, dust trailing behind his horse like a ribbon. He dismounted before the horse fully stopped, boots hitting dirt. His dark coat swung wide as he stepped toward her, hat low against the sun. "Miss James?" he said, breath short from the ride. She blinked once. "Sheriff Hale." "There's trouble," he said. "A boy. About 10 years old. Found him out past the creek. Half-starved. Says he was left behind." Her throat tightened. "Left? His name's Samuel. He said his mother went off with a man. Never came back. He's got no one." Her heart pulled. "Where is he now?" "In my office. But he won't speak to anyone. Just keeps the skin for someone kind. Said his ma used to talk about a lady with red ribbons in her hair who gave her bread once." Francesca's eyes widened. "I remember her," she said quietly. "Sarah. She came through last fall. Looked like she hadn't eaten in days." Merrick nodded once. "Will you come?" She did not hesitate. Inside the sheriff's office, the boy sat bundled in a blanket on the cot. His eyes were too big for his face. A bruise along his cheekbone. Francesca crouched beside him, careful not to crowd him. "Samuel," she said softly. He looked up. "I still have the same ribbon," she said, smiling just a little. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out the red ribbon she had worn that day. "If you want it." He stared at it, then at her. "You gave my mama bread." Francesca nodded. "Yes." "She said you were nice?" "She said if I ever got lost, I should find the lady with the red bow." Tears burned behind her eyes. She reached out, not to touch but to offer. "You are not lost anymore." He leaned into her, small and shivering. Merrick watched from the doorway. Later that evening, after Samuel had eaten and fallen asleep in the back room, Francesca stepped out into the street with Merrick. The sky was orange and violet above them. "I can take him," she said. "For now. My house is quiet. He should not be alone." Merrick nodded. "You have a good heart." She looked up at him. "The town does not think so." "I do not care what they think." She blinked. He took off his hat and ran a hand through his dark hair. "They mock what they do not understand. You are strong. You carry yourself like a woman who survived things. That scares people." She swallowed. You are very young to talk like that. I know what I see. And he looked at her, then really looked at her. The next few weeks passed with a quiet rhythm. Francesca took Samuel in. He followed her like a shadow, helping her with the goats, learning how to mix the soil in the greenhouse. He smiled more. Laughed sometimes. Merrick stopped by every afternoon. Sometimes he brought Samuel a book or a carved whistle. Other times he just stood near Francesca as she watered the tomatoes or shelled peas on the porch. You could court a girl half my age, she said one day as she handed him a glass of lemonade. I do not want a girl, he said. I want you. She stared at him, unsure whether to laugh or cry. You are kind, she said finally. He stepped closer. I am serious. You cannot mean that. I do. And I have for a while now. Her breath hitched. People talk. I do not care, he said. Let them talk. One evening, as dusk settled across the land and Samuel slept on the porch swing with the dog curled at his feet, Merrick stood from the chair beside her and dropped to one knee. She froze. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small ring. Simple silver. Nothing fancy. My mother gave this to me before she died, he said. She told me to give it to someone strong. Someone who would never need me, but choose me anyway. Her hand flew to her mouth. You are not too old, he said. You are just right. And I am not too young to know what love is. She stared at him, trembling. I want to marry you, Francesca James. Will you? Her eyes filled. Yes, she whispered. Then louder. Yes. He stood and kissed her, one hand on her cheek, the other pulling her close. From the porch swing, Samuel stirred and smiled, then turned over and fell back asleep. The first frost came early that year, silvering the grass outside Francesca's kitchen window. She stood at the stove, sleeves rolled up, pressing dough into neat circles while Samuel sat at the table carving notches into a block of pine with a pocket knife Merrick had given him 2 weeks earlier. A kettle hissed softly behind her, and the scent of apples and wood smoke hung in the air. Merrick had not missed a morning since the proposal. He'd started arriving just after sunup, before the town stirred, tying his horse beneath the elm beside her gate. He always knocked twice, the second gentler than the first. That morning, she heard it again. She dried her hands and opened the door. He stood there, cheeks ruddy from the cold, a parcel under one arm. I brought something, he said. She stepped aside to let him in. You always do. He handed her the bundle, wrapped in old newspaper. Found it in a trunk at the boarding house. Belonged to the man who ran the stables here before me. He died last winter. Landlady said I could have what was left. Thought you might like it. She unfolded the paper slowly. Inside was a well-worn gardening book, its spine held together with twine. The pages smelled of dust and dry sage, but the ink was legible. Her breath caught. This is from Boston. He nodded. Printed in '61. Thought you'd know what to do with it. She traced the edge of a page with her thumb. I do. Samuel looked up from his carving. Can I read it after her? Merrick nodded. Course. They sat together for breakfast porridge and fried apples, biscuits with blackberry preserves she'd put up in August. Samuel ate with both hands, crumbs sticking to his sleeves. Francesca turned to Merrick. Did you speak to the judge? He set down his cup. I did. He said the boy can stay with you for now, long as there's no one else claimin' blood kin. She nodded. I told him we intend to marry by year's end. Samuel looked up. Will I still live here after that? Francesca reached across the table and touched his wrist. You're not going anywhere. The boy nodded, quiet for a moment. I want to stay. Merrick leaned back in his chair. Then it settled. That afternoon, Francesca walked with Merrick to the edge of her property. The sun hung low, casting long shadows across the frozen dirt. He carried a hammer and a small wooden sign he'd carved himself. What will it say? She asked. He looked at her. Your name. And mine. Together. She stood beside him while he pounded the post into the ground. The sound of the strikes echoed faintly through the trees. When he stepped back, the sign read, Hale and James home. Her hand brushed his. He took it, held it warm in his palm. I've never had that before, she said. A name on something that stayed put. He looked down at her. That's all I want to give you. Something that stays. They stood in silence, the wind tugging gently at her skirt. Later, after he'd ridden back toward town and Samuel had gone to bed, Francesca lit a lamp and brought the gardening book to the table. She opened it carefully, smoothing the brittle pages. On the inside cover was a name written in faded ink: Margaret Fletcher, 1862. She traced it with one finger, then turned the page. Outside, the wind shifted. She let it. The house was quiet, and warm, and hers. Before she went to bed, she tied the red ribbon to the window latch, where it fluttered slightly in the draught. Not for show. Not for memory. Just because it was hers to place, and she wanted it there. The church bells rang once, slow and heavy, marking the first Sunday of Advent. Francesca fastened her shawl tighter around her shoulders and stepped into the aisle with Samuel's hand tucked in hers. The small pinewood church sat on the east ridge, where the wind came down clean from the mountains and the land flattened briefly before falling into brush and stone. Most of Red Elk crowded the pews that morning, their heads turning as she walked past. She kept her gaze forward, steady on the altar where a single candle flickered beside the cross. Samuel leaned close. That's the same candle they lit last year. She nodded. It's meant to remind us what carries through. After service, she lingered near the back door, waiting for Merrick. He always walked the perimeter of the building before joining her. She never asked why. This time, when he returned, his coat was dusted with frost, and his eyes were set on something distant. There's a man camped down by the south bend, he said quietly. Trapper, by the look of him. Claims he knew Samuel's mother. Francesca's breath caught. Did he say her name? He said she called herself Sarah, but added she'd gone by others. Said she died last winter, outside Fort Keel. She touched Samuel's shoulder lightly and stepped aside with Merrick, lowering her voice. He doesn't need to hear that here. Not today. I know, Merrick said. I won't tell him unless you say. She nodded, jaw tightening. And the trapper? I told him to stay clear of town. He didn't argue. They walked home the long way, through the cottonwoods along the creek, where the snow clung in patches and the water ran shallow and clear. Samuel ran ahead, chasing a crow with a stick, his laughter echoing off the bare trunks. Merrick slowed beside her. You ever think about leaving? She glanced at him. Leaving where? Red Elk. This town. These people. I did once. Years ago. She watched the boy splash across a narrow bend. But I kept getting pulled back. And now? She looked at him. Now I think I've built something worth staying for. His mouth turned, not into a smile exactly, but something close. I've been offered the land behind the livery. 40 acres, not all good, but it's ours if we want it. I could resign. Start something else. Francesca stopped walking. You'd give up the badge? I'd trade it, he said. For a house with a roof we raised together. For a boy who needs a name to carry. For mornings where I wake up and you're the first thing I see. She didn't speak right away. The wind moved through the trees again, gentler this time. You're not the kind of man I thought I'd end up with, she said. But maybe that's the point. He reached for her hand. She let him take it. At home, they found a note nailed to the garden gate. The handwriting was slanted and rough. The boy's kin is mine. I'll come for what's owed. Francesca read it twice, then passed it to Merrick. His jaw set, shoulders straightening. Was it the trapper? Most likely. She looked back toward the tree line. Then he's not gone. Merrick folded the note and tucked it into his coat. He won't take Samuel. I'll see to it. That night she kept a lamp burning in the front room. Samuel slept under a quilt near the stove. Merrick sat by the window, rifle across his knees. Francesca brought him coffee in a tin cup and sat on the floor beside him, her skirt brushing his boot. You don't have to stay all night, she said. I know. He tipped the cup to his lips. But I will. She watched the flame in the lamp flicker. I always thought peace would come quiet, like a silence after a storm. But this feels like standing with someone when the wind's still blowing. He looked down at her. Sometimes that's the only peace there is. The kind you hold steady with someone else. She leaned her head against his leg and closed her eyes. Then I'll take it. Outside, the frost thickened. Inside, the warmth held. By mid-December, the snow held to the ground in thin, stubborn layers, not deep enough to trap travelers but enough to keep the roads hard and quiet. Francesca stood at the back of her greenhouse, sleeves damp from watering the late greens she'd managed to coax through the frost. Samuel knelt near the door behind her, sketching lines in a patch of unfrozen dirt with the end of a broken twig. Think it'll still grow? He asked, not looking up. Not much now, she said. But the roots will remember come spring. He nodded, as if that made sense to him. Behind them, the barn door creaked open. Merrick stepped inside, brushing snow from his shoulders. His coat was unbuttoned at the top, and his cheeks were raw with cold. Heard from Fort Keogh, he said, voice low. Trapper's name is Eli Baird. Discharged from the Scouts 3 years back. No family, no land. Just his mule and a habit of turning up where he's not wanted. Francesca wiped her hands on her apron. Why would a man like that want a boy? He's got no claim. But that doesn't mean he won't try. Samuel looked up sharply. Merrick crouched beside him. I won't let him near you. Not now, not ever. The boy didn't answer. He just stared at the dirt, jaw tight. Later that evening, Francesca sat by the hearth with her sewing while Merrick carved a new latch for the pantry door. The flicker of firelight caught the edge of his jaw, and she watched the way his hands moved steady, unhurried. You ever think about your father? She asked, not lifting her eyes from her needle. He paused, knife stilled against the wood. Not often. He left when I was 4. My mother raised me in a sod house outside of Casper. She taught me how to shoot and how to read, in that order. Any brothers? 1. Died at Antietam. She nodded slowly. Most men don't talk about those things. I've never had someone to talk to. She tied off the last stitch and set the fabric in her lap. You do now. The next morning, they rode out together, Samuel bundled in front of Francesca on her old mare, Merrick leading. They followed the frozen creek south, where the cottonwoods grew thin and the land opened into low hills. Merrick slowed near a stand of juniper. Tracks, he said, pointing with the butt of his rifle. Single mount. Mule prints. Francesca's stomach turned. He's watching. Merrick dismounted and scanned the ridge, eyes narrowing. He won't strike in the open. He's waiting for night. Samuel twisted in the saddle. He's not taking me. No, Francesca said. He isn't. They returned home by dusk. Merrick tethered the horses inside the barn this time, bolting the doors from within. Francesca lit every lamp in the house and left a kettle on the stove. Samuel curled on the settee with a blanket and the carving knife Merrick had given him last week, working careful notches into a length of pine. Francesca cleared the table with slow movements, fingers brushing over wood worn smooth by years. Merrick stepped behind her, hands warm on her shoulders. He'll come tonight, he said. She nodded. Do we wait inside? No. We go to him. She turned. You mean to draw him out? I mean to end it. She studied his face. You won't kill unless you have to. I won't let him near what's mine. She didn't flinch at the word. Instead, she reached for her coat. They left Samuel with old Mrs. Tate, who lived alone 2 doors down and never turned away a child needing warmth. Francesca kissed the boy's forehead, then turned without a word. He didn't ask where they were going. Merrick led her out past the creek again, this time on foot, rifles slung over their shoulders. The stars were sharp above them, the sky clear and wide. They reached the same stand of juniper just after midnight. A figure stepped from the shadows. "You've been following me," Merrick said. Eli Baird was a wiry man with a beard gone gray at the chin, and a rifle slung loose in one hand. His coat was patched, and his eyes held the kind of hunger that had nothing to do with food. "The boy's mine," he said. "He's not." Francesca stepped forward, rifle at her side. "You left him to die." Baird's mouth twisted. "His mama owed me. She ran. I paid for him in sweat and time." "You paid for nothing," Merrick said. "He's not a thing to be claimed." Baird raised the rifle. Merrick didn't flinch. "You'll lower that or you'll die here." The wind stilled. Baird hesitated, then spat to the side. "Ain't worth the shot." He turned, walked back toward the dark trees, and vanished without looking back. Merrick waited until the sound of footsteps faded. Then he turned to her. "It's done." They walked home in silence. When they reached the porch, Francesca turned to him. "You said something back there," she whispered. "About what's yours." He looked at her, eyes steady. "I meant you." She stepped closer. "We still have a wedding to plan." He reached into his coat and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "The preacher's free New Year's Day." "I already asked?" She let out a breath that sounded like a laugh. "You didn't tell me. I wanted to be sure we made it through." She held out her hand. "We did." He took it, held it like it was the most natural thing in the world. Behind them, the windows of the house glowed gold against the snow. No more threats. No more watchers in the trees. Just the life they'd chosen, steady and waiting. The wedding was small. Red Elk's chapel filled with the scent of pine boughs that morning, branches cut from the ridge and tied with calico scraps that Francesca had kept in a chest since girlhood. Snow clung to the windows, soft and slow falling, and the warmth inside came more from the people than the stove. Merrick stood at the front, collar pressed and boots polished, a linen shirt beneath his coat. His hands were steady. He'd trimmed his hair that morning, left it damp around the edges. Francesca wore slate blue. Not white, she never cared much for what people expected, but a deep, quiet shade that matched the sky before snowfall. Her hands didn't tremble as the preacher spoke. She looked at Merrick without hesitation. Samuel sat in the front pew between Mrs. Tate and the town's schoolmaster, his legs swinging just off the ground. He held a small wooden box in his lap, the one Merrick had built for him to keep his whittling knives in. He'd tucked the ring inside it, wrapped in a square of handkerchief that had belonged to Francesca's father. When the vows were done, no one clapped. Instead, the room fell into a hush that felt sacred. Merrick kissed her exactly once, and then again when she leaned into him, laughing quietly against his shoulder. They walked home through the snow, Merrick pushing the cart that held a basket of bread, a jar of pickled carrots, and a bottle of elderberry cordial the midwife had given them as a wedding gift. Samuel stayed close, boots crunching beside Francesca's skirt. That night, the three of them shared a meal by lamplight. No guests, no toasts. Just roast chicken with herbs from the greenhouse and potatoes boiled in butter and salt. Samuel fell asleep with his cheek against the table, and Merrick carried him to bed without waking him. Francesca stood at the hearth, turning the ring around her finger once. "Does it feel strange?" Merrick asked, returning from the boys' room. She turned. "No. It feels earned." He stepped behind her, arms around her waist. "I've been thinking about the land." "The lot behind the livery?" He nodded. "If we clear the rocks before thaw, we could start with fencing. Maybe a barn after that. I'd like to raise something here. Not just live." She leaned back into him. "What would you keep?" "Cattle, maybe. Chickens. A mule or two. And me?" He kissed the curve of her neck. You most of all. The next weeks passed in quiet labor. Merrick stepped down from his post as sheriff and took up work hauling timber with a pair of brothers from the northern valley. He came home each evening with sawdust in his sleeves and stories from the ridge. Francesca began drafting plans for a small root cellar, marking the earth with a stick and string as Samuel watched. The boy had begun school again. He walked there on his own, bundled in a coat that Merrick had altered to fit him. He still carved in the evenings, but now his pieces had purpose handles for tools, pegs for the drying rack, a small frame for a sketch Francesca had drawn of the house in springtime. One afternoon in late February, Francesca returned from the creek with her apron full of kindling and found Merrick kneeling beside the fence line, a small bag of nails at his side. She walked to him, set the kindling down, and knelt beside him. He didn't look up. We could build a shed here, just behind the house. Keep tools out of the weather. She nodded, touching the edge of the cedar plank. We could. He turned to her. Do you ever regret staying? She shook her head once. No, even when the sky feels too wide? She smiled faintly. That's when I remember I have someone to stand beneath it with. He reached for her hand, rough with soil, and kissed the inside of her wrist. I'm going to build you a porch swing. You'd better, she said. I've waited long enough for one. By early March, the land began to soften. The goats birthed twin kids, and Samuel named them Hazel and Thorn. Merrick planted his first row of potatoes behind the greenhouse, and Francesca began teaching Samuel how to read seed packets and measure sun hours. One morning, she found Merrick standing at the fence with a folded sheet of paper in his hands. He passed it to her without a word. It was an offer low, but earnest from a family in Miles City wanting to buy the livery lot. She read it twice, then looked at him. You thinking of selling? He shook his head. I just needed to see what we're worth to someone else. She folded the paper and tucked it into her apron. We're worth more here. That night, she sat beside him on the porch, the two of them beneath a wool blanket, while Samuel slept inside. The moon was low, casting everything in silver. I used to think I'd always be alone, she said. Made peace with it, even. He didn't interrupt. But this is better than peace. This is home. He wrapped an arm around her, drawing her close. It's ours. She laid her head on his shoulder. And it's enough. He kissed her temple, soft and sure. Her eyes drifted shut. They stayed like that until the lamp inside burned out, and the night wrapped itself around them like a second quilt. Years later, the house still stood, stronger now with the additions Merrick built by hand. The porch swing creaked in the wind, always in motion. Samuel grew taller, steadier, and when he was grown, he built a small cabin of his own just beyond the ridge but came every Sunday for supper. Francesca kept her greenhouse, and Merrick kept a journal of planting dates and first frosts. Each morning, they rose before the sun and stepped into the cold together, hand in hand, to meet the day. And every year, on the first snow, Francesca tied a red ribbon to the window latch, not for memory, not for show, but because it had once led someone home.